Ukraine continues to bomb Russia, while NATO is calling for a global preemptive strike against Russia, and the Biden regime is discussing arming Ukraine with nukes. World War III watch. Ukraine fires US-made ATACMS missiles with cluster munitions against Kalino airfield in Russia's Kursk region. In yet another dangerous escalation in the war in Ukraine, the Kyiv regime has fired long-range US-made ATACMS missiles into Russian territory yet again. This time, the attacks appear to have centered around the area of the Kalino airfield. This is the third time Ukraine shoots NATO-supplied and authorized missiles into Russian territory. Captured footage within a Russian neighborhood shows the explosions in the distance, and also you can see a worker inside of his car as munitions explode around it.
Но это беспилотники. Ух ты, а что это такое? И там, глянь, А что это такое?
Пиздец, ебать, там хуярит, блядь. Твою мать, блядь! Пизда нахуй!
Lord Bibo reported on Telegram at night the Ukrainians hit an airfield in the Kursk region with ATACMS missiles. 7 out of 8 were intercepted/damaged. It is not particularly clear what they were striking and what goals they wanted to achieve, since there has been no aviation there for a long time. Russia pulled its air force back a while ago, and now it's empty, especially since the ATACMS strikes began. Therefore, now the clock is ticking for the renewed Russian retaliation, and the shadow of World War III edges ever more closer. So clearly this is a non-active airbase in Russia, but what sticks out here is clearly Ukraine is firing inside of Russia with these long-range missile systems, and it's just outside of a residential area. You have civilians, residents, looks like suburbs, that are filming these long-range missiles targeting this airbase. Is this a message from Ukraine and from NATO that this is how close that they're willing to get to murder innocent people? And NATO is definitely escalating the situation. Military Chairman of NATO, Admiral Rob Bauer, declares preemptive attack on Russia should be considered. NATO Military Committee Chairman Admiral Rob Bauer from the Netherlands discussed the need for preemptive strikes on Russia in the event of an armed conflict. The Eurasia reported NATO is discussing the possibility of preemptive precision strikes on the territory of Russia in the event of an armed conflict with the alliance countries, aka World War III. This was stated at a conference in Brussels by the head of the military committee of the bloc, Admiral Rob Bauer. He called positive the fact that NATO has changed its attitude to the essence of the organization as a defense alliance, as well as the perception that it is necessary to sit and wait for us to be attacked and only then react. Bauer is quoted by Bloomberg saying, quote, "It is more competent not to wait, but to hit launchers in Russia in case Russia attacks us. A combination of precision strikes is needed that will disable the systems that are used to attack us, and we must strike first." Ukraine is nothing but a pawn for NATO and for this rogue federal government here in the United States of America that is clearly marching us closer and closer and closer to a World War III scenario. The senior NATO official Rob Bauer also said it's time to prepare for, quote, wartime scenario as Britain and France consider deploying troops in Ukraine. NATO's Admiral Rob Bauer also said in Brussels on Monday that businesses must be prepared for the worst as tensions with Russia continue to escalate. Bowers quoted saying, "If we can make sure that all crucial services and goods can be delivered no matter what, then that is a key part of our deterrence."
Business leaders in Europe and America need to realize that the commercial decisions they make have strategic consequences for the security of their nation. Businesses need to be prepared for a wartime scenario and adjust their production and distribution lines accordingly. Because while it may be the military who wins battles, it's the economies that win wars. We now know exactly how we will defend key and relevant places in our alliance against the two threats described in the strategic concept and the NATO military strategy, being Russia and the terrorist groups. We also know precisely what assets or capabilities are required of us in a crisis scenario, including where and what to deploy and what their tasks would be. And we know, for at least 2 years already, that the investments necessary to make our new plans executable will be higher than 2%. Right now, we see that it varies per nation and how much more than 2% they need to spend. But let's say that the overall percentage that is necessary to make the new plans executable is much closer to 3% of GDP than it is to 2%.
Translation: NATO wants the rest of the world to literally pay for World War III. This is why we voted for Trump, not only to prevent World War III, but to make sure and ensure that we're not paying into this thing. According to a report from Le Monde, both Britain and France are currently discussing the idea of deploying troops to Ukraine in a bid to support the anti-Russian war effort. RBC Ukraine notes the United Kingdom and France do not rule out the possibility of a foreign military contingent in Ukraine. This is because of the risks surrounding Donald Trump's victory in the United States presidential election, Le Monde reported. According to the agency's sources, discussions about sending Western troops and private defense companies to Ukraine have now intensified again. The details of the debate on this issue are classified, but they have intensified after Trump's election victory. And the current regime in the West is escalating a potential not only World War III scenario, but a possible nuclear exchange in the region. Biden regime discussed giving Ukraine nuclear weapons. On Monday, news broke that the United States discussed giving Ukraine nuclear weapons in recent meetings. Kyle A. at the Anti-War reported, according to the New York Times, U.S. and European officials have discussed a range of options they believe will deter Russia from taking more Ukrainian territory, including providing Kyiv with nuclear weapons. The outlet reports that Western officials believe the Kremlin will not significantly escalate the war before Donald Trump is sworn in as president in January. Following the election of Trump earlier this month, the United States and its NATO allies began taking steps to rush weapons to Ukraine and give Kyiv the ability to strike targets inside Russian territory with long-range weapons. American officials who were briefed on the intelligence community's assessments told The Times that weapons will not alter the challenging situation that Kyiv is currently facing. Here's a quote: U.S. spy agencies have assessed that speeding up the provisions of weapons, ammunition, and materiel for Ukraine will do little to change the course of the war in the short term, The Times reported. Desperate to bolster Ukraine's standing in the war before the transition of power on January 20th, the Biden administration is looking at a range of serious escalations. Here's a quote: U.S. and European officials are discussing deterrence as a possible security guarantee for Ukraine, such as stockpiling a conventional arsenal sufficient to strike a punishing blow if Russia violates a ceasefire. The article continues, quote, several officials even suggested that Mr. Biden could return nuclear weapons to Ukraine that were taken from it after the fall of the Soviet Union, end quote. And you gotta love how U.S. spy agencies are the ones claiming that if we continue to arm Ukraine, if we move the needle, if we continue to assist them on this war effort, it's not going to escalate things. It's not going to make a difference in the short term. Everything's going to be okay. Yeah, that's what the CIA does. It psyops the general public, telling you one thing while they do something else, and it creates mass chaos in the world. And I personally think they're setting this stage and causing people to believe that, yes, if we continue to arm Ukraine, it's not going to escalate the situation, knowing that it obviously is. And we may potentially end up in a World War III scenario and nuclear war scenario before Christmas of 2024. And you want to know what they'll do? They'll blame it all on President-elect Donald Trump. And they'll say he claimed to prevent World War III before he was even inaugurated. Not only are these people attempting to destabilize the world, this is to sabotage President-elect Donald Trump and his campaign promises and his legacy in his upcoming administration. World at war. Surveilling drones spotted near 3 U.S. Air Force bases in England last week. Reports quote the United States Air Force as saying that a number of small drones have been detected last week around 3 key bases, U.S. air bases, in England used by American forces. The Associated Press reported the drones were spotted between Wednesday and Friday near RAF Lakenheath, RAF Middenhall, and RAF Feltwell. They were actively monitored after they were seen in the vicinity of and over the 3 bases, United States Air Forces Europe said in a statement. The report continued Lakenheath is home to the 48th Fighter Wing, which the United States Air Force describes as the foundation of its combat capability in Europe. Mildenhall hosts the 100th Air Refueling Wing, and Feltwell is a hub for housing, schools, and other services. It is unclear whether the drones had hostile intent, says the Air Force, but since the incidents came during this week filled with escalations, it sure seems likely. It is clear that NATO is pushing this conflict alongside of this rogue federal government and death cult, aka the Biden regime in the United States of America, to destabilize planet Earth, to bring death and destruction, to empower the global New World Order, and also at the same time, empower and enrich the world banks, the military-industrial complex, and all these defense contractors, not only in the United States of America, but globally. It's also a move to sabotage Agenda 47 and the incoming 47th President of the United States. Can President Trump secure a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine? Can President Trump cause NATO to stand down and stop instigating this global World War III nuclear holocaust? Can President Trump ensure peace before his inauguration? In my opinion, this is going to come down to whether or not NATO is going to stand down and stop poking the Russian bear. Now, again, Vladimir Putin is very intelligent. He's very smart. I don't think he'll take the bait. But at the same time, Ukraine is bombing air bases very close to residential areas and suburbs now inside of Russia. If they start bombing and murdering innocent people, Russia will respond. And this may be out of Trump's control. Pray for our world. My name is Drew Hernandez for the Gateway Pundit, and you have been on watch with Drew Hernandez. I'll see you guys on the next one.